was trying to decide the next recipe to do for this channel, I came up with two, and my family said, why not do both? Because we did the fried chicken last, and my family also loves salmon. So we're going to do the, oh my goodness, pan-roasted salmon with spring Pistou. It's got a beautiful picture that's probably going to be upside down on this one, but oops. So, sad thing, one of the reasons I was going to do it is because I had a bunch of basil left from another recipe that I did, not for this channel. And when I went to go look at it today, just now, it was all wilty and gross. And so I had to go back to the store to get basil. I kind of work that way when I make recipes. I have a little bit of this left over. What can I use it for? And then I get whatever else I need. Sadly, it didn't work out this time. But we're going to make this recipe. My family loves salmon, so we've got a lot of salmon here. It calls for 4 6-ounce portions. I don't know if that's what we have here. I swear my kids can eat like at least 8 ounces of salmon each. So I'm going to put this back in my handy dandy book holder. So we'll have it ready. But the first step is to brine the salmon. I already have my water in the bowl, and I'm going to add a bunch of salt. And I'm just going to use these tongs to stir it up and get it dissolved. Hopefully. This is cold water, just cold from the tap. So you stir this up, and then add, I think we're probably good there. I don't see any bits. I'm gonna add ice to help keep it cold. And then we're gonna add the salmon. I think you just leave this at room temperature. You only have to, oh, great. They are individually wrapped, so. So we've got these nice salmon portions. We got them from a local, that's a very large one, from a local seafood shop that we love. They will cook things for you, and you can go and get raw seafood as well. So. So we've got 5 portions here because my kids will probably eat 1.5 at least each. I have 2 of those kids, so. All right. These are brining. They have to sit for 15 minutes. And while that happens, there are a couple other things we're gonna make. So I'm gonna wash my hands, clean up a little bit, and be right back. Okay, I've cleaned up and I have everything ready for the next part of the recipe, which is called a tomato relish. Really, it's just some tomatoes and some shallots, some salt, and some olive oil. So I'm gonna cut up the tomatoes, measure them, put them in here, and then the rest of the recipe needs 2 shallots minced, and I need a tablespoon here. These are really large shallots. I'm just gonna mince these up and take a tablespoon out and use the rest for the rest of the recipe because they're very large. So I think that'll be plenty. And these are just supposed to be halved, so I probably won't use this whole container. It said cherry tomatoes. These are grape tomatoes. Similar, slightly smaller. All right, that should be plenty. And now I'm gonna just mince up all of these shallots. Okay, got a little teary there. I'm gonna take my 1 tablespoon, put it in here. And just put the rest in this. I think this is what I had the salt in before, but it's okay. This is a lot of shallots. Okay, I'm gonna put some salt on that, just sort of to taste. And then some olive oil. This is just probably extra virgin olive oil. It's the olive oil I keep around for everything. Gonna mix that up, and you serve this on top of the salmon with the pistou, which we'll be making next, underneath. So this is just gonna sit and marinate for a bit, clean up, and come back with the pistou and dry my eyes. All right, so the next thing we're doing is making a spring pistou, which is a mixture of basil and garlic and olive oil, and then we're gonna mix it with some other things later, but for now, that's all we're gonna do. We're gonna mix all that in here, but first I have to mince up the garlic. So I'm gonna do that. Probably not gonna be too picky about it because it's going into the food processor anyway. Not a great mince, but it's a start. All right, and then I'm just gonna pick off the tough stems of the basil. It asked for a cup. I found the little clamshell packages say it has up to half of a cup, so I just have 2 of those clamshell packages here. Figured that would be close enough. And I've washed them. Didn't really bother to dry them all that well because there's definitely some liquid in this recipe, so they don't really need to be totally dry. A little bit of water's not going to hurt it. All right, so that's all the basil, and I need a teaspoon of salt in here. And the olive oil. Just gonna process that. I always forget I need a spatula when I use this. I think that's good. And you put this in a bowl and store it in the refrigerator until I need it. So I'm gonna do that and we'll be back for the next step. Okay, so now we're gonna continue making the pistou on the stove. I don't have 2 nice large skillets, so I'm gonna use this fry pan. I don't know which is called which. I think it's the opposite of what I think. So I've got some neutral vegetable oil. I use grapeseed in here, heating up the pan. And the first thing we're gonna do is cook the shallots. So I'm gonna need this. And then for the next part, for cooking the salmon, I'm also gonna need 2 tablespoons of oil, so I'm going to go ahead and measure that out so yeah, we have that ready. So, like I said, I have an induction stove. It heats up pretty easily, pretty quickly. Doing this over medium heat, I'm going to do it at about a 6 on mine. So, coat the pan. When it gets a little shimmery, that means it's hot and ready, and then I'll put in the shallots. All right, starting to see a little shimmeriness. There we go. Yep. All right, so these have to cook for about 5 minutes or until they're, you know, starting to look cooked, like onions. They get translucent. Okay, these are starting to look softened and a little bit translucent, and there's some browning going on, which is, I think, what is to be expected at this point. And the next thing is you add wine, white wine, and there was no indication at all of what type of wine to use. I like to cook with wine that I like to drink, but I generally like to drink sweeter white wines. I like Rieslings, not always super sweet, but so I found this Sauvignon Blanc that said it was good with fish and had some flavors that I thought would go well with it. So I picked this up, and now we add this. Make sure to scrape everything up and let it reduce. Brought it to a boil. Now you let it simmer for about 3.5 or 4 minutes till it's about 1/4 of what it used to be. I'm just going to time it because it's hard to tell when something's reduced by 1/4, especially when it's relatively thin to start with. Not a huge, thick, deep. That's it. Not a deep piece of liquid. So. And let that go for 4 minutes. Okay, so this has been about 4 minutes. I assume it's reduced by about 1/4. The next thing we do is add a cup of clam juice. I found this near the fish counter. This particularly was at Whole Foods, but I did see it at my regular grocery store too, so probably can find it just about anywhere. So you add this, stir it up, and then just keep it warm at this point. So I'm going to transfer this to another burner. And keep it warm. The next thing we do is the fish. Cook the salmon. So I have to get that out of the brine and pat it dry, and also score the skin side just through the skin with a knife. So I'm going to be doing that next. I'm going to start with these smaller ones because I think I can fit probably all of those in the pan at once. And maybe kind of can fit them on the plate. I've got one larger one that we'll do separately. The recipe is really for 4 portions. We just got a little bit more because, you know, we like salmon a lot around here. So, patted these dry. I'm going to go ahead and up the heat to medium high. We're going to go with 7 on my stove. And put the oil in the skillet. This is again the neutral vegetable oil. And I'm going to do my best to slice just through the skin and not through the flesh on the back side here. Oh, looks like it still has a few scales on it. That's awesome. Might need a sharper knife. This is not going very well. This place is usually pretty good about not having scales on it, but all right. Well, that worked, but I am still getting scales off of it. Oh my goodness. All right, that's gonna have to do. Also supposed to season it with salt. Put that skin side down in my oil. The cutting is not working, so I think I'm going to abandon that, but I am going to keep checking them for scales. I don't know how. So many scales on it. Got myself with the oil. Looks like I'll be able to fit 3 in here. Not any more than that. Hopefully these won't stick. Fingers crossed. These are supposed to go for about 3 to 4 minutes, I think. At this point, I'm supposed to add some butter to the pan, so I'm going to go ahead and do that when they start to brown along the edges. That one's not going to fit. Looks like it might be good. The skin is actually very helpful, keeping the fish from sticking, so that's good. The next thing we're going to turn these over and baste them with the butter. I'm just going to put a plate in the microwave to store them and put them on when they're done, since I have a few more to make. All of them wouldn't fit in the pan. These are slightly larger than what the recipe calls for, so if it were just 4 6-ounce portions, I might have been able to fit it. So now we're going to turn these over. I think we're about ready. They're about cooked halfway through. I'm going to turn them over and let them cook on the other side and baste them. That looks good. Let them cook for about 30 seconds, and then you start basting them and cook them for about 3 minutes. We'll probably have a break in the video here in a minute, but just because my phone is going to do something. But we'll be right back. These cook for about 3 more minutes on this side until they're done. Okay, so we like our salmon a little on the medium rare side, medium rare side. So I'm going to say these are done for us. So I'm going to go ahead and take these and put them on the plate that I have in the microwave. Oh, the middle one is certainly going to come out. This one seems fine. And then this one, oh, it has a little bit of sticking. I'm going to use the spatula to help get that out. I'm going to do the same thing with these other two pieces that I have here. That have been thoughtfully scaled by my kitchen crew. Okay, it looks like it's about halfway cooked through, so I'm going to turn it over like I did the other ones. And get the other ones out. Arrange the plate a bit so they will all maybe fit on. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one off. And that's going to be one of the first ones. These are the first ones we're probably going to eat. Leave that in the microwave. It stays warm. Our microwave stays warm when the light's on, particularly. And now, this one, yeah, this is all done. Okay. Enough. There we go. So, what I'm going to do now is finish off the spring Pistou. We're going to bring this back over here. We're going to turn this burner off. And we're going to bring this up basically to a boil on over high heat. And then we're going to add the basil puree, we're going to add some lemon juice, and then we're going to add some butter and swirl it around to make it a little bit more creamy. So basically we're just getting this warmed through, and then we're going to turn off the heat and add in the basil puree and the lemon juice and the butter. So I think this is definitely warmed through. I don't know how much this sees, but I want to kind of get it a little bit off the heat a bit. So we're going to stir in this basil puree that has been in the refrigerator. It's the basil and the garlic and the olive oil. So this is the pistou, not pea stew. Pistou is a French word. I'm not even sure what it means, but it's a culinary term. I can look that up before I wrap this video. Got the juice of half a lemon, and then stir that up. I'm going to add in the rest of our butter and swirl it around until it's melted. And that is it. Let me wash my hands very quickly. Just want to swirl this around, get it melted. I feel like this should be less liquid, but this is what the instructions say to do. So we'll see how it turns out. think I was supposed to whisk it actually. There we go. And that is the whole recipe done. All I have to do is plate it up. And I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, today on Cooking the Books with Heather, we made the pan-roasted salmon with spring Pistou from the Poole's Diner Cookbook. And I have to say, the salmon was cooked perfectly for us. It was not too salty. I think the brining really helped with the flavor. Salmon was delicious. The sauce, the Pistou, which, I looked it up. It is basically just a French style of pesto. Does not usually have nuts or cheese in it. It was a little thin. I feel like we should have reduced it a lot more before we added stuff into it. It certainly looks more soupy than the one on here looks. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, but ours was certainly, it was more like a thin broth with a layer of green on top of it. So I would reduce it more. If I made this again, made the sauce again, I would reduce it more before I added the pesto, the basil mixture and the butter and all that into it. So it would be more like a sauce and less like a soup. It was good. It was a little cleanup intensive, but I mean, because there's the bowl for the brine, and then the relish, and then the Pistou with the food processor and all of that. But it was good. My daughter loved it. My son didn't eat much of his, which is very strange, but I don't think that's the fault of the food. He may be getting a little sick. We're keeping our fingers crossed that he's not, but I don't think it was that he didn't like it. I think he just, because he didn't eat his bread either. So, and he's a carb kid. So I don't think that is anything against the salmon. I thought it was delicious. But the sauce, I could kind of take or leave. So thanks for watching, and please like and subscribe.